Hello, Chef James, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for
Thank thank you for having me.
everyone. I am overjoyed to be kicking off the new year focusing on really delicious and incremental yet impactful ways that we can add more nutrition and joy to our everyday life via food. And I am so excited to share Chef James' story and his amazing product line that is truly kicking the seasoning shelf's ass. And I am just so thankful for you and your creation and the entire career path that has led you here. So thank you so much for everything you've done. And thank you for taking a real hold of the nutritional seasoning market.
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, kudos to you. I mean, you're amplifying small businesses, you're amplifying products that you love. I mean, everything you're giving me goes right back to you. And also, I just want to add, I am so honored to be launching 2025 because um, it feels like it's going to be a really important year for functional health, hopefully, right? And of course, the food industry. And also, there seems to be a theme happening for myself, my wife, some other people I know, and maybe for any you yourself, and maybe for those listening. But it's the theme, I think, is what got me here will not get me there. Where I'm going. So all the things that got me to this small point, like this is the time all of us need to kind of reevaluate what got us here and change gears because where we're going is going to require some new habits, some new mindsets, and some new intentions.
Ooh, man, you can say that again because it's I've how do I say this? I was kind of forced into being more mindful of what I put in my body because my body just simply could not tolerate some of the things I was eating any longer, and those are ingredients that are in almost 98% of processed foods. So I've become really dearly acquainted with having to put a lot of raw materials into my body to get the job done. And, there was a very big um, window, I'll say, for opportunity for those within the food industries and the health industries to really harness making general health and wellness available to the masses in a way that was, I think, not only applicable to their current level of understanding, but also giving them access to making it really easy to integrate. And within my own journey of trying to find these certain things for myself, I came across your profile on Instagram. And I thought, my goodness, this is certainly going to help solve a lot of the problems that I have within my nutritional gaps that I'm looking to harness. 39. You've got some hormonal things that I'm looking to work on, like many of the women across America. And, you know, things are starting to trend towards organ meats and really beautifully raised and sustainably harvested foods and ingredients, bringing a bit of homeostasis back to our life. And I'm really thankful that we're in a time now, especially moving into this year, where I think the environment is going to be a little bit more palatable and a little bit more forgiving for those that have been considered quacks and very woo woo and trying to ride the health market, when in reality, we're returning to what I love that you call ancestral habits. And I'm just, it's like a pinch me moment for me because I feel like I'm going to be able to eat a lot more food again. So I'm very excited.
Oh well, yeah, I'm really grateful. I mean, I'm grateful that I did see it coming. But I'm grateful that I was right. You know what I mean? Like, because if it could have gone sideways, of course, I could have been wrong, right? But I instinctively I was like, okay, collagen. I remember I've been a chef in the health field for 20 years, right? So I've seen trends come and go. I remember when collagen was just like in small circles, like just those of us in the health field knew about it and were utilizing it. And then it started becoming a little bit more vogue around like putting it in hot drinks and things like that. And then I watched it suddenly be available at like convenience stores, like you can go into like a 7-Eleven and there's collagen sticks, so I was like, okay, this is an animal product that has taken time, but is now permeated that kind of bubble and is now available to the masses. And I was like, that's a good sign. Now what's next? And I was like, okay, organ meats, they've got to be coming because it's an animal product. So there is a hurdle, of course, because I think organ meats, people think of organ meats as, I think when people hear organ meats, I was thinking about this a lot this weekend because I was at this convention. I think they think of their own vulnerability and their own mortality. Because when you hear of a liver, you think of your liver. If you hear a heart, you think of your heart, and it's our mortality comes up, right? So I've been thinking about like I should change the name for organ mates because this is what they did around World War II. The government put money in to marketing organ meats because they were worried about a protein shortage because all they were sending all the muscle meat abroad to the soldiers. So they literally started a campaign to promote people to eat organs. And this is when Meatless Mondays happened. So people think that's a modern thing. Nope, it happened around World War II, and the government was the one that came up with it. And then that's also when they came up with all these names. They called them variety meats instead of organ meats. You know what I mean? So I'm like, that was smart. I got to do that myself. So I think in 2025, we're going to call them freedom meats. That's the word that I'm throwing around right now. Freedom meats, because it's all about, food freedom, being able to eat the whole animal, getting access to the foods that we want, whether it's raw milk or whole nose to tail, whatever it is. So freedom meats is going to be my word for the offal of the of the animal.
I love it. It really is so perplexing that, we live in a time and a place where we do need to kind of try our spin on propaganda to get food to be accepted again. But I would love to touch in on your time as a chef. I think people really sorely underestimate the way in which a chef really intimately needs to know their customers, and their customers are everyone, and everyone is the populace of this country. So I think chefs aren't recognized enough for the way in which they not only recognize but create food trends. And those food trends lead to gigantic changes in the health food industry. They lead to gigantic changes in the way that we are creating our food and how we're interacting with it, whether that be on a local scale or we're taking more of a commercial aspect to it. But I would love to hear the way in which your chef career started and kind of what your first inklings were that you could approach food as a chef in a different manner because of your focus on the benefits of the food that your clients were seeking.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a journey, but it had lots of gaps in between. So around 7 years old, learned to scramble an egg, and I was hooked. Like loved it. I didn't really think of it as a career then, but I just loved the act of cooking. And then it was like and then there's a big gap. And then like in junior high school, around seventh grade, they were offering a gourmet cooking class in school. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. And I signed up for it. And I was an average student. I was not like a 4.0 at all. And I did that class, and it was like, I found something that was like mine. I loved that class. I got awards. I got, the an A, like perfect grade. And I love the teacher. The teacher responded to me really well. Like we just like a part of my personality really came out. And I loved it so much that my mom asked the school if I could take it twice. Like, because they offered it during the day and then they offered it as a after school program too. So I ended up doing the class twice. And what's so fascinating though is I was a really picky eater, like extremely picky. Like didn't have my first taco until I was in college. Um, Still to this day don't like eating sandwiches or hamburgers as most Americans do. Like like I was paleo before it was deemed, cool. Here I was like as a young kid, we would be traveling, to Grand Canyon, stop at a McDonald's because that was cool then or whatever. That's what people did. And they would have to special order the hamburger because I didn't eat, ketchup and all that stuff in the bun. And so then they would get a plain burger, and then I would pretend to pull them. I would basically pretend I was eating the hamburger, but I would actually be pulling the meat out of the bun, then crumple it up, throwing the bun and the wrapper away. So I was only eating the meat, plain, nothing on it.
I love
So
that.
yes, everyone, I invented paleo, but I just didn't know to call it that. Thank you very much. No, but yeah, picky eater didn't didn't really understand the benefits of food, didn't really understand why I was even into food. So here I was in this culinary class as a seventh grader, and I was making food that I wouldn't even eat. And it was only like a year ago that I put the language to it, and I was like, "Oh, so cooking is my love language. This is how I express to people how I feel for them." And it really showed up when I was in 7th grade. I learned to make a tostada salad, and I'm talking a tostada from scratch, where you actually shape the tortilla, and I was loved it, and I didn't eat it, but I went home and I made it for my parents, and I had so much fun making it for them, and I think about that moment, and I'm like, "Oh, that was me expressing my love to my family, even though I never tried it."
Yeah. So beautiful.
So, it really wasn't until I was, much older that I started to equate like, "Oh, well, it was honestly, it was really 9/11. That was kinda like the Pearl Harbor for, those of us old enough, and it just made me audit my life. I was like, "What am I doing? I wanna make sure everything I'm doing has intention and has heart." And I was doing some things that had heart, but I was doing a lot that didn't.
Mhm.
And I just audited my life. I was like, "What is it that I've always loved?" Well, it's cooking, but what do I do with that? And I don't wanna work in a restaurant because I see that they don't get paid well. I see the hours, I see the toil, and I see the burnout, and I was like, I don't really want that." And I was living in LA at the time, and I started to think, "Well, wait a second. I could be a private chef." Now that's totally different. Now that's like a one-on-one relationship. I can really put intention into helping them, and that excited me. And so I found a school in New York. It doesn't actually exist anymore, at least it folded into some other program, but it was called the Natural Gourmet Institute. And it had been started by a woman named Anne Marie Colbin, and this was in, like, the '60s, and it was known as a school for really, like, alternative foods. It was definitely known as more vegan, vegetarian, but it wasn't solely that, but it was really known for healthy food
Mhm.
and fusing lots of flavor in that healthy food. Because we have to remember healthy food I mean, this is, you know, 20 years ago, right? Not that long ago. Healthy food was grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and, like, a baked potato. Like, that wasn't that long ago that healthy food was just bland.
Yes.
So this school was all about, like, fusing, flavor into the food, so I was jazzed, and I went there, and I was in my early 30s, and there were all these kids out of high school, and they kinda were like, we're in New York, let's just party," and I was like, "I am here to learn." I showed up for every day for class. I got a perfect attendance. Anytime there was opportunity to work at the market or to learn from a restaurant, I did it, and I just I was like a sponge absorbing as much as I could, and what was cool about that and which paid off, and I wasn't doing it for this, but later on, I'm like, "Oh, this was really good I did this," which is this school saw me as someone who is reliable and capable and responsible. And so basically, after I graduated, all these people looking for private chefs would call the school, and if they lived in LA, guess who they referred? It was me, because they knew I would do the job, I would show up, and they knew they could count on me, and I would represent the school really well. So that that was an amazing process. I built this amazing resume working for, like, Tom Cruise, George Clooney, um, gosh, Gerard Butler. I got to cook for Barbara Streisand briefly. I mean, it was just incredible. And, and yet I still wasn't happy. Like, and it's not that I didn't enjoy that one-on-one, but then I started to realize I wanna help even more people. Like, that the way I was cooking was working. People were losing their baby weight, for example, and they'd been tried for 2 years and they couldn't lose it. And it's
Mhm.
what's interesting, we were talking about trends a little earlier. It's like the trend that I guess I follow that really isn't a trend is I just make everything from scratch. Like, I don't use anything ultra processed,
Mhm.
and I just use food that is an ingredient versus foods that have ingredients. And just doing that, people's baby weight would just melt off. People's would feel better in their body. And it was just like I got this amazing response. And then the word started to spread, and I built an amazing career as a private chef. But then I took it and started a meal delivery service. And that was a whole other chapter of my life, which we can talk about. But it was like that. That is a perfect example of you're a baker who knows how to bake a pie, who thinks they can run a pie business. That's a whole whole other bag of worms.
I love so much that you knew from a very early age that this was something that, well, let me ask you this. Did it identify as passion, or you just became immersed in it and you didn't really kind of recognize that the fusion there was passion kind of taking the wheel inside?
I mean, I knew I liked it and I was hungry for it. Like I had a neighbor who was really into gourmet cooking. I was always over there like learning from him, and he taught me how to make sauces from scratch. And then I would, if I saw like a cookbook or a magazine with food, I would always, like when you're in the waiting office, you can grab People magazine or you can grab like the cookbook stuff or the cooking stuff. I was always grabbing the cooking magazine. So I knew that had an interest, but at a very young age, I didn't see it as a career option. So I just saw it as a hobby. Because
Mhm.
I thought, well, if you want to be a chef, you have to own a restaurant or work in a restaurant. That's late hours. My father owned a grocery store and he used to work late hours, and I rarely saw him when I was really young. And so I just was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be with my family at night, not working.
I love that. I wonder if, as I hear you say this, I'm thinking about the time frame where you were a chef, and that was really aligning with when I first started, I think, really stepping into paying attention to food in Philadelphia. And there was such a turn where you did start to see the rise of celebrity, and there was a lot more attention paid to what are they eating, where are they working out, where are they going, and there did become this underbelly of, I'm guessing, just mainly younger women starting to really focus on what they were eating for health purposes, because we see these actors and these models preparing for different things, and we know what they look like before because we're seeing them weekly, and over time we see this big reveal later. And I think there was a very big moment where, I guess, diet culture is what it's been coined overall, but there was always this aspect of food trends. What can you eat? What shouldn't you eat? And the shot diets with the cayenne juice and the lemon. Like, I'm sure you'd seen it all because you were in the very precipice of creating these trends that would then ripple through the country through all of these media outlets. But with what you were learning and wanting to bring that to a larger audience, were you finding that you were just seeing that people weren't getting it right with what they did need to have as far as intake goes to make these changes come about, combined with, exercise, of course? But
Absolutely. I mean, there's a great quote by Bill Schindler. He's a professor of archaeology and food archaeology, and he wrote a book called Eat Like a Human. And he has a great quote where he says, we are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat. And that's really, that always kind of like makes me pause, because there's over 8 million species. So it kind of tells you how far we have come from our innate knowledge of what we need. And so when I first entered kind of Hollywood and cooking for the stars and whatnot, I immediately saw it. Like the Fat Flesh Diet was the popular book at the time. And most people listening to this probably don't even know what it is, because it's a fad, right? They come and go, these books. And so as a private chef, I had to immediately learn what was the trend. I had to not only experience the diet so I understood it, but I had to really know how to cook it well. So I feel like my first 10 or 15 years as a chef was just like me constantly doing whatever was the trending diet. And so from me being a guinea pig on those diets, what was so fascinating is I really saw how they messed up my metabolism, how they messed up my digestion, how a lot of them didn't work. And so I just kind of felt like I was like almost like in an ocean, where the waves are pulling you all over the place. That's what the diet culture feels like. It just kind of pulls you all over, and sometimes you feel like you're drowning, sometimes you feel like you're above water, but it's not never consistent, and it's never permanent. And so that's what I started to really look for in health. It's like, what is sustainable? And eventually, that's all I focused on was like, I only want things that are sustainable because if we don't do them, it doesn't matter. And like, I used to even explain to people that I could buy the most expensive food, the best food in the world, but if your system is not digesting it properly and not absorbing it properly, then it doesn't matter. Like, so this idea of what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing, it's like, I just feel like we gotta like almost quiet the noise and go a bit more inward and just focus on the simple things because it's these simple things like digestibility. Like, is my gut working properly? Am I eating foods that are causing inflammation? You know what I mean? So you gotta like identify what is going on before you really want to focus on like, well, I should be cutting out all these other foods. Like go work with a really good practitioner, get a blood test, get a stool test, like work with someone that really understands how to focus on your body. And I feel like once you go inward in that way, then the trends, you start to see that these trends are truly just trends. And like the one that's the constant is real food. So if I were going to do a food pyramid, my food pyramid would be the very top of the pyramid is you focus on foods that have flavors found in nature. So not natural flavors because those are added flavors, not artificial flavors because those are added flavors, but foods that have flavor that is found in nature. So meaning it hasn't been adulterated, right? It hasn't been changed, hasn't been added to. Focus on that. And then in the middle of the pyramid, nutrient dense foods. So that's not fortified foods, it's foods that are already nutrient dense. They haven't been stripped, they haven't been manipulated. That's your main focus. And then on the bottom of the pyramid, mindful eating. Just mindfully eat. Be aware that whatever passes you to go, whatever passes your mouth is something that is to nourish you, that is something to help you thrive, not to hurt you. And don't let those foods in. You know, that this idea that we are like, we have to take ownership that, you know, that image of being in the ocean and being pulled everywhere, right? In that scenario, we're being manipulated. And we are. Like we are. I mean, ultra processed foods, the big ag, they are manipulating us through marketing. But that's where it kinda starts and stops, like, they can't force the food into our mouth, we are doing that, and we have to take accountability for that. I'm always telling parents, like, that I've worked with, they'll be like, "Oh, my kid's addicted to Cheerios." I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. You should go get that Cheerio tree and chop it down, like, get it out away from your house, you know, make sure that they stop eating those Cheerios from that Cheerio tree." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, where are they getting the Cheerios?"
Mhm.
"Oh, that's true, I'm bringing them into the house."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Yeah." So the house is sacred, just like your body, and only bring in foods that you want you and your kids to eat. And anything else is a treat, and you make sure that it's hard to get. So that makes sure you have to actually, like, go out of your way to get it. You don't make it easy because if it's easy, you eat it. I guarantee it. You make every excuse in the book to eat it.
I think you've touched on so many things, but it kind of jogged a memory for me that I forgot. I've been on a journey of trying to eat better for the purpose of my digestion, not being able to eat things for about, say, 9 years. And in the very beginning, I was just truly so lost about what to eat that I did work with someone that was creating meal plans for professional athletes in the city. And it brings me to thinking, you left the private chef industry to create this, um, in essence, meal delivery service that anyone could have access to. But was your impetus trying to help those that are kind of trying to readjust their diet and what they're taking in and what they're learning about food with the meal plans and the menus that you had available? Was that something that you, in refining and refining in what you knew worked for others to eat, and with you being the guinea pig, did your menu for the meal delivery service represent those learnings and kind of wanting to pass that on discreetly via the meals that they were getting?
It did, yeah. So we were now this is a long time ago, but we were one of the first, so there were only like 5 companies back then, and most of them were focusing on calories. And we forget that, Weight Watchers really promoted this back in the day, but they were like, a cookie and a apple have the same calories. Doesn't matter which one you eat. You just count those calories. You can only have the one, right? Or you can only have so many calories in a day. And like right away, I immediately knew that was wrong. And I was like, no, no, no. I don't care about the calories. I care about which of those foods you're eating. And if you're eating cookies and that's how you're getting your calories, you will not be that is an illusion of health when we focus on calories. We have to
Mhm.
focus on the quality of that calorie. And I mean, that's even what brought me to Pluck now, like the products that I push now, because if you think about it, there was a study in 2015. It basically said 92% of Americans are nutrient deficient. Well, we're in 2024, soon to be 2025. So my guess is that's actually closer to 94% now.
Mhm.
We are not calorie deficient though. And when I think of calorie deficiency, I grew up with Sally Struthers on the TV talking about Ethiopian kids who didn't have any food and they're basically emaciated and there's flies all over. It's like, so that's what I think of when you think of nutrient deficiency.
Mhm.
Americans are nutrient deficient and yet we're also obese. So clearly it's about we are making the wrong food choices. It has nothing to do with how much food we're getting, right? So that's how that's kind of what I was focusing on when I had that meal delivery service is like, I really try to push people away from counting calories, even though I do think there is a place for that. But I was just trying to get people to stop thinking like that because that kind of mindset can be really damaging and create lots of like, food issues, or body issues, body shaming issues. So I was just trying to focus on food quality. And I was trying, and to what I said earlier, I was making everything from scratch. And we also had so we were gluten free before that was even vogue, because I just kind of knew like most people are sensitive to dairy, gluten, and soy. So I was like, let's pull that stuff out right away. Let's just assume we all have some issues with it, and let's show people what does it feel like in your body to not have those allergen, or sensitivity foods, right? So, because we only know what we know through contrast. So most people don't even realize that they're not thriving because they've been with these chronic illness issues for so long. So I was really, in a sense, just trying to show people what their body could feel like. So then that way, once they did feel this thrive or this difference, then they'd be like, oh, this is what's possible. So I just need to change this, and then I can feel like that. And so we had our normal program, but then we had this other one that was also a bit revolutionary, which calls sugar controlled detox. It was basically a low carb option, and it was a 2-week program, and we would pull out anything that had sugar and anything that converted quickly into your blood, your blood glucose. So we pulled out most fruits. The only berries were the only ones you could do, and not even strawberries, just very low glycemic berries, like so raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries. We pulled out, we pulled out basically everything like potatoes, grains, pastas, all that stuff. So really, what people had access to on this 2-week program was protein, usually animal protein and fish and whatnot, and then they had vegetables, low glycemic vegetables, and then they also had some starches, so like resistant starches like parsnips or butternut squash or something. Like, so we really just focused on that, and then good fat, and that was really and good fat is coconut oil, ghee. So we didn't do any dairy, but we would do some ghee sometimes, because ghee is clarified butter for those that don't know, and usually the dairy is removed, and um, and then we would do animal fats like tallow and lard and duck fat and whatnot. And so in 2 weeks, though, people, so men would lose between 20, basically between like 18 and 23 pounds, something around there. And then women would lose between 13 and like 18 pounds, something around there. And that was just in 2 weeks, and the best testimony to this day that I love telling, and people love this program because it was like you could go in and you couldn't do alcohol as well. And so they would go in, let's say, drinking like 3 glasses of wine and kinda doing their lifestyle, and then when they after 2 weeks, because you recalibrate the palate as well, they would try to drink a glass of wine, and they could barely finish it because they were tasting the true sweetness of that wine. And the same thing with, like, desserts. They couldn't eat a dessert. They were too sweet, and they would go to eat, like, a strawberry, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, it's just so flavorful and sweet," and they would only eat a couple because that was enough. So, we were really creating amazing contrast for people to see, like, what their bodies could feel like without eating the ultra-processed foods, without overstimulation, and, um and it's extremely sustainable, which is the other thing. Like, I say it's a 2-week program, but it's a life program as well. Like, you really could eat it that way all the time. It's a low-carb diet. And this is the testimony I love, though, and this really encapsulates, I think, when we're talking about 2025 and functional health, this is it right here. So this one guy had seen his doctor. He was told he was on the precipice of type 2 diabetes. Like, the doctor was like, "You need to start taking medication. This is serious." And he said, "Okay, can I please, I heard about this program. Can I please just go do that first, and I'll come back afterwards. You can test me again, and if it doesn't work, I'll do the medication." So he came and he did our sugar control detox, 2 weeks. Went back to his doctor, got tested. He was no longer on the edge of type 2 diabetes. And his doctor said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I just changed how I ate." And his doctor said, "No, really, what did you do?" And he's like, "I changed how I ate." Doctor said, "There's no way that would work." He said, "I'm gonna go find a new doctor."
Glad he did. My goodness. I love that in 2025 you bring me up to the topic that I am so happy to broach, and it is that chefs, nutritionists, and what I'll call professional wellness experts are really going to be the ones championing change in 2025 for those of us that are either on the journey or those that know they need to take a journey but don't really know where to start. I love so much that in you having this whole trajectory of having to not only think about how the diets were affecting you in preparing them and getting to know them intimately enough to be able to make them and adjust them and tweak them for your clients, but then to take that, scale it, and put it into another mechanism of just being able to continue dialing down in the nutrition. And I think the thing that is going to be the big crux of 2025 for the health industry is going to be making these changes as approachable and incremental as possible. I think our populace is at a really delicate place of having little to no information about the food that they have in front of them, and that it's not actually food at all. I think there's needing to be a recalibration and a rebranding of food as we know it. And I think a lot of people will be really surprised to know that outside of pressed flours and things like that, that have been reduced down from its original raw state to something with very little preservatives of any sort, that anything outside of that is not food. And with all great hopes of 2025 and the ushering in of sweeping changes like the removals of cancer causing colorants and things that children are eating 10, 15, 20 times a day for weeks and years at a time, I think people are hesitant to know where to start. And for me, I was so excited to speak with you because I think that what you've done with Pluck is one of those really beautiful products and things that people are using in some shape or form anyway with the seasoning. And you've created the ability for them to add one thing to their routine that may very well give them those feelings of health change, of incremental understandings of body awareness and what they're putting in their mouth and how that relates to how they feel, even if it's a few moments after eating. I think there's a bit of play with thoughts of elimination diets, and that being something sort of that comes into this year with us, that helps those that are looking for change to remove certain things and replace them with others and see how their body reacts to it. And I just really would love for you to talk about Pluck and how you think that that might fit into someone that is looking to make health changes but are just truly lost and just don't really know where to begin but would like it to be easy.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, I will share too. I do have some fears about where we're going a little bit with the functional medicine stuff before I go into Pluck. But um, to me, health and health practitioners and health philosophy is like genes. Like there's so many options of genes out there, but they all fit differently. They all, hug you differently. And the biggest fear I have is that, I saw this in my time in 20 years. I would see these celebrity chefs that were not healthy at all. But then as the health movement was starting, their, PR people were like, "Oh, we got to rebrand. We got to do this." And I mean, I remember I was a food stylist when I first got out of school, and I was working with this one guy who was, I mean, he'd come out with a healthy cookbook, and it was such a joke. And he was in turn a joke because he was talking about health, and it was just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is not healthy what you're saying. And it was so generic. And so I just kind of caution people to like, approach all of this stuff with a little bit of delicacy, like just a little bit of pause, and just remember that if, you have your own intelligence, and I know that it's confusing out there, and I know that that once again, going back to that ocean, that we're being pulled in all these different directions. But you as a human, your body, we're in this Homo sapien body, right? And that was developed 300,000 years ago. So we have historically learned, our bodies have been designed to communicate, is this food going to kill me or is it going to nourish me? Right? That was ultimately the crux of what our food and our taste and our senses were communicating to our bodies back then. And so now it's a little bit more confusing, but you still have that innate communication pathway in there. You just have to access it. And how you access it is you got to follow that pyramid I suggested earlier. Eat foods that are nutrient dense, because flavor equals nutrition. So you got to choose foods that have the flavors that are found in nature. Those will most likely be nutritious because they're real food. And then eat slow enough, and sitting down and not in a rush state, and maybe do a prayer or like a grace before you eat so that you actually take pause, right? Like eat slow enough so that your body can tell you when to stop. So your body can tell you, is this nourishing me or hurting me? And it will absolutely tell you. We get these clues all the time. We're just not listening. Like sometimes you could be in the grocery store and you're about to grab that ultra processed food from the shelf, and you can't grab it. Like it falls off, and your hand keeps trying to like get it, and you have to do it 3 or 4 times before you finally grab it. That's your body telling you it doesn't want it. That's muscle testing, right? So I just advise everyone, like, yes, it's confusing, but you have an emotional intelligence, and let's not throw that out. So that being said, I'm all about, we need to eat our food versus swallow it. So how I kind of came up with Pluck is I was looking at what, first of all, I identified what's the most nutrient dense food on the planet, and I did the research, and it was like organ meats, beef liver specifically, kept coming up every time, and I was like, okay, but within why are we not eating these? So what are the hurdles? And then it was like, okay, well, people think they're gross. They don't want to touch them, smell them, or cook them, or don't know how to cook them. And then they also don't know how to source them or where to source them. And then if they do know that organ meats are important, they're taking capsules. So those are kind of the 4 hurdles. And capsules are inconsistent. We get capsule fatigue, and it moves us further away from that innate knowledge of what our body needs. Because when you swallow something, you get a delayed reaction. So if I put salt on your tongue, your body will receive it probably that first time and say, "Ooh, that's good." But by the third time, the flavor of the salt will change. It actually doesn't taste good. Like, the fourth time, your body will be trying to reject it. You'll be trying to drink enough water to get it off your tongue because it won't taste good. That is your body communicating, "Hey, you're overstimulating me with sodium, like, stop." And we don't get that because if you swallow a salt tablet, you get no communication. It's delayed, and then you suddenly are like 30 minutes later, like, "What? Why am I so bloated? Oh, I got too much," right? So that's why I'm really advocating, like, you gotta eat your food mindfully. So that's really what I set out to solve with Pluck, and so I was like, "Well, we already have this modern technique of freeze drying that preserves the organ meats so they're shelf stable, so that they're very nutritious still, like, almost kind of the best preservation of nutrition than even dehydrating. It's even better than dehydrating. So I was like, we already have that because they're putting it in capsules. So why don't I just take it out of the capsule and then make it taste good? And then I'm like, well, we already have seasonings that are also dried and shelf stable, and we have all these things that I can add to it. And it was really like I was just making a dry pate. That's really where my impetus came from. Was like, I'm going to make a pate, but I'm going to make it out of seasonings and dried product. So then that way you don't have to cook it. You don't have to worry about the taste because I'm making it taste good. And
Mhm.
then you also don't have to worry about sourcing because I'm focused on 100% grass-fed New Zealand cows. I'm sourcing from the same top, providers as the supplement companies. We're making sure that they don't have any vaccines, that they're not getting fed, b pr antibiotics and things like that. So we solved all of it, and then the learnings came because I that's kinda where I started and stopped, and then I did it, and then I started to learn as people ate it and used it, and now that we've been in our 4th year, like, people are like, "Oh, it goes great on everything." "Oh, I didn't know that." "Oh, it makes my food," because the organ meats have umami in them, and umami is the 5th unique taste, so we have salty, sweet, bitter, sour, and then umami. Well, umami, because it's unique, brightens the other flavors, so it actually makes the food you add it to taste better. I didn't know that. I was like, "Wow, okay, so that's cool." I was just trying to get organ meats as easily and deliciously into people's diets. Like, I didn't know even I knew organ meats were nutrient dense, but I was like, I mean, we've heard from fathers whose daughters had, like, skin issues, were born with them, and nothing was working, and then they're like, "Oh, and then we discovered organ meats in your product specifically because we couldn't get capsules in my kid." Like, so we started using your product, and the skin issues, went away, and their skin is now clear and beautiful, and hair thinning is now thicker. Sleep is increased. Foggy brain disappears. Energy levels are higher. Pregnancy. Oh my gosh, the amount of pregnant women who reach out to us, and just this one recently, she just had her third baby. She said with the first two, she had hemorrhaging and extremely low milk supply. She said the only thing she did different with the third one is she used Pluck from the beginning and then through the pregnancy. And she said she had no hemorrhaging, and she has an abundance of milk. And I've heard from countless doulas and midwives who tell me, "Oh yeah, yeah, whenever we always know if the mama to be is eating organs because the placenta looks gorgeous in size and in color." And so we always know that you just see it, and I'm like, "Yes, like, yes, organ meats for the win. Yes," you know?
I would love for you to tap into ancestrally how we are bringing what used to be the only real food we had access to back into our diets on a regular basis. And why is organ meat so nutrient dense? I think we've never learned this adequately enough, and even those that may fancy themselves to understand a bit. But could you go into why exactly organ meat is so nutrient dense?
Yeah, I mean, Bill actually talks about this as a professor of archaeology a lot, Bill Schindler that I mentioned earlier. So we start out as foragers. And when you forage for calories, it's a long day. Like, think about what you have to do to get enough calories to sustain yourself. So our brains we didn't have language when we were foragers. The way we couldn't talk the way we do. We didn't have as many tools as we do. There was just like development was not was kind of low in terms of what we were capable of doing. And then we became scavengers. And when we were scavengers, we did get some muscle meat, but yet we still didn't change that much. Um, it was really when we became a predator, when we actually came up with a tool and then used it, and then we got to the animal first. And what he says, what these archaeologists say, is that we got three things that we historically never had gotten, which were blood, organs, and fat, because those were the prized parts of the animal. So the predators always ate those before, and the scavengers got to just pick at the skin and the meat. And those three things enabled us to talk right now. They enabled our brains to grow bigger because we got like almost like a powerhouse of nutrition right away. And so it enabled our entire bodies to change to the Homo sapien body we're in now. And so organ meats, the way like I talk about it is like you think about when those hunters would go out back in the day and ancestrally. A lot of times, and anyone that's fasted will understand what I'm saying. When you fast, your senses get heightened. And so what they would do is they would fast before they would go hunting. And they would then eventually kill that animal, which could take a week or more, right? Sometimes. And the first thing they would do is they would butcher the animal and eat the liver or the heart raw right there. And it was like them getting their multivitamin from Mother Nature and getting all the nutrients that they had been fasting from eating right back in their body, and it would replenish their stores, and they would feel good again, and then they would be able to like trek that animal back to the hearth. And that's also why I kind of always tell people, I'm like, because this is a trend right now. So we still see, even in the health field, we still see these trends, right? So even like we can be talking nose to tail. It's like, oh, yay, everyone's focusing on nose to tail. But then there's still a trend within that, which is I only eat liver and I only eat ribeye. It's like, what? Like, in what world were we designed to just eat the ribeye cut of an animal and only the liver? Because if you take that scenario I just mentioned, those hunters probably ate the liver. So now they're bringing back the animal to the hearth to the everyone else. So that means no one got liver. So why were we only focusing on liver? We really need to be focusing on the whole animal. And for example, like spleen, for example, is higher in iron than liver is. Pancreas has natural enzymes in it to support digestion. Heart has CoQ10. So each part of that organ, all the organs in there, they all have what we call cofactors or like supports like. So, and this is a very ancestral term, but it really does make sense when you start to break down that idea that, well, the heart has the nutrients that it needs to perform its duties. Well, those same nutrients are in your own heart, and they're going to target each other. So when you eat heart, it's going to target your heart. When you eat liver, it's going to target your liver. And they know this with even like like glands. There's companies that put animal glands in their supplements with the knowledge, because they've done the testing that if you eat that gland, let's say if you gotten your gallbladder removed, for example, right? Well, if you've gotten your gallbladder removed, you can't digest fats, animal fats, and the doctors don't tell you that. So they remove your gallbladder, but then they don't tell you nutritionally what that does for your body. And so now, and there's so many people getting their gallbladders removed, but now people are like, well, I'm still gaining all this weight. I don't understand. It's because you can't digest your fats anymore. So you need to take a supplement now to support digestion of the fats. Well, the really good supplement companies are putting animal bile in the supplement because they know it will target what you're missing now. They know that it will target that gland. So this like supports like is really important. But if you kind of dig deeper into, well, what are the nutrients in these? The easiest way to explain it is just look at what's in a prenatal. Like, so what science is telling us we need to create life, from the folate to the B vitamins to the vitamin A to the iron to the magnesium, it's all in organ meats. But what's beautiful is that it's not someone in the laboratory going, well, I think we just need to give iron to people. Because this is back in the day, what they did is they would suggest, like, here, just take an iron pill. What they didn't realize, and they only learned within the last few decades, is like, oh, but iron doesn't absorb without other cofactors. So you can't just give iron alone. Well, that's what they're doing in lab. They're just isolating things and then they're just putting them in, thinking that that's enough. But Mother Nature knows better. Mother Nature puts it in the food in the way that is most absorbable and in the cofactor that it's going to make sure that you're going to receive it. And the way I talk about Pluck, because this is the biggest thing that comes up for us, is like people say, well, how much organ meat am I really getting? It's a seasoning. That means I'm getting little amounts, right? And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing. This idea of go big or go home, this very American concept, that's not necessarily how our bodies work. Like, so if your body's a sponge, and let's say I put it under a faucet and at first I'm just dripping water into that sponge. If I drip the water, every drip of that water is going to be absorbed by that sponge. Like every drip. And eventually each drip is going to saturate that sponge and it's going to be filled with water. But if I open that faucet and instead of dripping it, just let it gush down, I'm going to lose tons of water from that sponge. And that's what we're doing. What happens is people are just hearing a trend of like, oh, I should be taking this supplement. So they go and start taking that supplement. And what they're doing is they're getting too much too fast and they just pee most of it out. And that's why we call it's expensive pee. And that's what's happening. So for my money, it's about, and this goes back to what I talked about earlier. For my money, it's about what is sustainable and what is going to be most effective. And so for me, we already season our food. So putting the organ meats and blending them with seasonings, that's just saying, well, you already seasoned food, just replace what you're doing with Pluck. And now you're getting the micro dosing, little drips frequently, because you season your every time you eat, you're seasoning your food, equals cumulative effect. And to me, I would rather do that than, because the reality of, well, how are people eating organ meats right now? That's the question asked. Well, they're either not eating them at all or they're eating them like once a month. Great. So for 3 days after you eat it, you're doing really well. But I want you to be feeling really great every day.
Mhm. Man, James, you literally just gave the best explanation. And I even, someone that have been looking into this for years now, just you really did kind of bring it on home. There is such a disconnect with our ancestral upbringing of what we were able to eat and what we were able to digest. And I think it's, we're only aware of the life we've lived, and within the lifetime that we've lived. I was born in 85. I remember very distinctly going to the grocery store when I was younger, and it was very small. And it was a lot of raw ingredients, and you were lucky if you got a fruit snack or maybe a little Oreo cookie or something, but there wasn't the sheer amount of just fabricated food that there is now. And I think for those that maybe did not grow up near places where food was raised or grown, or were really reliant upon that grocery food chain to get their interaction with food and sustenance, there's just such a incredible learning gap period with where we started, but also the understanding that in just the last few hundred years, and really just the last 50, there's just been such an onslaught of things that our organs should not be digesting, and we're never mobilized to digest, and are not even caught up to being able to handle what was added just 49 years ago, let alone everything that has come since. And your explanation of the cofactors and what needs to be taken in, and it correlating to the organs that work with, like, it just makes so much sense. And I hope those that are listening and are finding this to be just slightly overwhelming, just know that this is a journey of your life. This is, as Chef James said, something you want to integrate slowly. These drips are where the habits come into place. And for you to be, kind of double dipping the habit of it being an ancestral one that is taking you deeper and closer to being more in likeness and aligned with what we should be eating for the wellness of our body, let alone it doing what it's supposed to and being able to repair and kind of make up for the true, I guess, just societal malnutrition that we're all very blindly unaware of.
Yeah, and I'll speak to two things too, because there's still some a myth, a big one that people that don't know about organ meats kind of think, and so let's just name it, which is they think that organs are just liver and kidney, first of all, and so these are the organs that they're thinking of when they think this. But they think like, well, organs are where the toxins are stored, or where the toxins are processed and then stored. So like, why would I eat that? That's toxic. And that's so A, when you say that, you're clearly thinking about the liver and the kidneys, because those are detoxification organs. And that the thing that the issue with that is that it's a fallible thought, first of all, because you're forgetting how miraculous your body is. Like, if the human body was not its amazing, beautiful, thriving, or tool to survive, like, in no world would your body be designed like the grate in your sink, the strainer in your sink, where the food would get clogged, but then there was nothing to clear it. You know what I mean? Because then in people in that person who thinks that the organs are toxic, they're assuming that the toxins just get stored in the organs and then that's it. Well, if that was true, we would be dead because we live in a toxic soup. Like, our world is so toxic that if our bodies weren't as resilient as they are, we would all be dead. We would be extinct. So right there, like, you need to realize the body is resilient and amazing. It is truly miraculous in what it is capable of doing. So let's start there. And then secondly, you need to know that, well, what the job of those organs is to take those toxins and turn them into water soluble form. Once they're in water soluble form, they can then leave your body, and they leave your body through your sweat, through your poop, through your pee. So then the question becomes, well, are you eliminating? Like, are your elimination pathways working properly? And that's the question you got to figure out, is if you're not pooping regularly, if your pee is like bright, like brown and like really like not as clear, if you don't sweat, these are the issues that you need to go and work with a health practitioner for, because that means that you're right. The toxins are not leaving your body, but guess what? They don't get stored in the organs, because once again, if they did, you would be dead. Where they get stored is in your fat. And that's why people that are extremely obese, and this goes back to that idea that we need to do things gradually, because let's just say you're extremely obese. Well, if you lose that weight too quickly, those toxins that are stored in your fat could kill you. Like, or they could make you extremely sick. So you have to be like, if you're in an extreme already, then the way out of that extreme is not to just jump to the other side of the extreme. It's to actually gradually find the health modalities that you can do in small increments daily that can become lifestyle. And think about life. Like, think about any aspect of life. And let's just pick intimacy, for example. Like, if your intimacy quota was so extreme where you had to basically be like hugging someone for 5 hours a day, let's just say, like if think about the most extreme intimate act that you had to do that to feel intimacy, it would be like no one would be in, like we would be all like sick of each other, right? But
Unhealthy.
think about, like, that's not gonna move your needle, is like being, in in an intimacy extreme for a long period of day. But let's just say if you have intimacy issues and maybe you're doing a touch here and there every now and then, like little touches, those are gonna move your intimacy needle more than some extreme. And the same thing goes with brushing your teeth. If brushing your teeth was 2 hours a day, most of us would not brush our teeth, right? Like, it's the little things that we can do. That's why extreme, health modalities, when COVID hit, that's why they all went away. Like most people dropped all their health modalities and they went straight to all the comfort things from addictions to baking bread to eating junk and sugar and whatnot. Like that, all those sales, all that those practices increased and all health modalities just fell off. And that's because they're not as sustainable when they're in huge chunks, like when you have to spend so much of your day and so much of your mindset doing them. So I'm all about that sustainability. And yes, to your point, like organ meats are they are Mother Nature's multivitamin. Like even with Pluck, so Pluck is 5 organs. It's liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. We hope to add lung in 2025. And that's it. It's so they take the organs, they're freeze-dried, they're powdered. There's nothing added to them to make them flow. It's just they're just dry from loss of moisture. And then we're combining them with red mineral salt and spices and organic spices and herbs that have not also don't have flow agents and additives and carriers. So when we list what's on the label, that is it. And there's nothing hidden, and it truly is the easiest way to get organ meats into your diet. Now, does it have to be the last way? No. Like I just want you to eat, whole animal. Like I just want you to get that nutrition. So we're always imparting like easiest practices of how to then start eating organs. Like I've done so many podcasts where you can hear me talking about how to ease into eating organ meats. I also we have tons of recipes on our website of how to incorporate organ meats. So we're very our mission is to help people feel better in their bodies. And we know that if we can get your nutrients and your vitamins, like if we can get you no longer deficient but sufficient, then you'll feel better in your body and then you'll start treating people better. And then now we have a better world. So I really do believe organs can save the world.
Chef James, you are such a delight. I think the very same way about very minute daily changes. I call it the 1% a day. Like, what can you do 1% a day to just get to the next 1%? And so much of what I talk about on the show is just highlighting the individuals that found that thing and found the thing that they wanted to spread around the world and help people to understand so their life could improve. And it was really important for me to have this conversation with you because I think you are championing health in a way that makes it just a little pun here, so digestible, but also just something that I think people will come to find they will enjoy adding into their routine. And in researching for our conversation, just the different seasonings that you have and the packaging is so inviting and explains so much and also really makes you want to pull it out at dinner time and
Mm.
or when you're meal batching for the week. And I also find it so comforting that you're still directing people towards trying things outside of their comfort zone. You don't want them to just stay here in a place of only adding seasoning to their life, but the seasoning can still be added to you venturing out and maybe trying your first organ meat that maybe is a smaller ingredient in something bigger that you're making. Or as you said, you have so many recipes on the website and you do make it so easy to approach. And I think that is what is needed now more than ever are those of us that are further ahead on the journey that are turning around and kind of lending that hand down to bring us up. And I think 2025 feels like a year already that is going to be, a tide rising all boats to betterment and just spreading that joy around in a way that I find really refreshing. And I love your work so much. And um, we'll have everything in the show notes, all of the seasonings, everything for you to take a look at with the recipes. If this intrigued you at all and you have any questions about Pluck, organ meats in general, please check out Pluck's social media accounts. Everything will be down below, but there is so much information and so much information that Chef James has readily shared on a ton of other podcasts and mediums. So please, if you find this intriguing at all, I would really love for you to dive into this because Pluck is a really beautiful way to add a health routine to your life that you will not only enjoy flavor wise, but as he said, we'll see the effects slowly over time for you and your family. And gosh, I'm an emotional person, but I am so thankful that you went in this direction. And I know that it had a lot to do with you trying to help your children to get a little bit more into their diet as well. And coming from a picky eater himself, I find it really beautiful that you have, created something that your younger self maybe could have used in your years of being very indecisive about what you wanted to eat. But I love your journey of just trying to help those that you love and now have evolved it past that and made it available for the whole country to bring both delicious flavor and health into their daily routine in a way that they can absolutely do no matter how busy they are or where they find themselves throughout their day. So thank you for just making it easier for us all to take a little bit more exploration into healthier habits and especially ancestral ones.
Well, thank you. And I want to just share too that if there's one thing I learned as a private chef is you really have to meet people where they are. And I think this idea, there's a lot of shaming out there, and a lot of people kind of saying you got to eat this way and not that way, and just a lot of people are so confused. And so I do just kind of welcome everyone to just mostly, we've talked a lot on this podcast about honoring your own emotional intelligence, but let's also honor our journey with food, that we all have one. And I think it's really important to, if you are someone, let's say, you're listening to this and you're vegetarian or vegan, and here we are talking about animal products, like that's okay. Like it's okay. Like I want you to follow the diet that feels right to you right now. I've been in this industry for 20 plus years. This is where I'm at right now. And as you mentioned, like Pluck came out of me wanting to get the most nutrient dense foods into my daughters, but also myself, because I wanted to make sure I was going to be around to be with them. And so honor your journey. And I will just kind of ask that you just trust one person in that relationship, because there's one entity within that relationship of you that will never lie to you, that will always be true and is not influenced by anything else around you, like the trends. And it's just your body. So whatever diet you're following, whatever trend you're testing, like let's see how your body reacts to it. And if your body reacts to it, then I just ask that you listen and that you respond in kind, because your body will not lie to you. So how does that look? I'll just give a couple examples. Maybe you're eating a specific diet, but you're nauseous and you feel bloated every time you eat it. That is a sign it's not working. If you notice that you're getting breakouts in your skin every time you eat this diet, that is a sign it's not working. If you notice your anxiety levels are increasing, if you notice that you're kind of can't remember things, if you notice the whites in your eyes are getting redder and redder, and you're not, they're not as clear, that's a sign. So just start taking note of these things, or maybe you're gaining weight and you just can't stop. That's a sign that what the diet you're eating is not working. So just listen to your body. We have the answers. We're just not listening.
I love it so much. Chef James, I always have a final question that I ask all of my guests, and it's this: how do you make your life rich?
Oh, I mean, really, to me, it's about connection. I I think about mortality. I have my father died this year. I've had death in my life, and I I think that at the end of the day, none of it really matters except whose hand are you holding? You know what I mean? So I really do believe that it's not so much what we accomplish in this life. It's great if you help to support and move people up from your missions. I'm a big fan of that, but don't do it at the expense of, like, it's really important to me that I don't work at the expense of not being there for my family, or not nourishing and nurturing like intimate connection, because those are, at the end of the day, when stuff hits the fan, that's what you're left with, is how did you treat people, and how do you show up in their life.
Wow. You're a treasure. This was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to hear of your father's passing. It's big change.
Yeah, no, a lot of changes, a lot of we experienced in my household, like a lot of scares, I have a podcast myself called Everyday Ancestral, and we have an episode coming out uh, just here at the end of the year, and I know this comes out at the top of 2025. But if you're curious to hear kind of what our year looked like, please check out that episode. It's the very last episode of Everyday Ancestral for 2024, and it was a challenging year, but it was really, there were so many gifts, and this conversation is a gift. And so I really thank you for doing what you do and for amplifying small business and amplifying these health messages. It's just it's really important work. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. This has been such a joy. Thank you.